So this is where we stopped, right here, where he says, after he says, I know what they told you. We're right here. By now, I'm sitting up on the bed, and he's making me put on my clothes. And the weird thing is, none of this is a surprise. So remember, Max is in there, and his dad is snuck into his room. Somehow, I always knew this would happen, that he would come for me in the night, that I'd wake up to find him there, filling the room, and then I'd feel empty. I'm so weak. I can hardly put my shoes on. Like when you wake up and your arm is still asleep, and you can't hardly make it move. That's what I feel like all over. Numb and prickly and light as a balloon. Like my hands might float up in the air if I let them. This'll be an adventure, he says. You're going to have the time of your life, boy. Okay, we're leaving and not a peep out of you. The bulkhead door is open and you can see the stars. Some people think the stars look close, enough to touch. But Freak says the sky is like a photograph from 1 billion years ago. It's just some old movie they're showing up there. And lots of those stars have switched off by now. They're already dead. And what we're seeing is the rerun. Which makes sense if you think about it. Someday the rerun will come to an end and you'll see all the stars just start to flick off like 1 billion little flames blown out by the wind. This way, he says, quiet as a mouse. There's snow on the ground. Not a lot. Enough to cover the ground. I can tell how cold the air is, but I can't feel it, even without a jacket, which I didn't have time to put on. The cold doesn't matter. Nothing does, really. Not Grim or Graham or the old stars in the sky or Freak or in the fair Gwen. They're all just make-believe. This dream I was having for a long time, and now I'm awake again, and he's still filling the room somehow, even though we're outside. The lights are out at Freak's house, and I'm thinking, the stars clicked off, and I don't even know why I'm thinking that. It's like a dead voice in my head or something. We're under a streetlight when he says, let me look at you. He's got these big eyebrows that make it hard to see his eyes, and that's fine. I don't want to see them. Looking at those eyes is asking to have a bad dream. My, he says, checking me out. Will you look at this? It's like I'm looking at an old picture of myself. You really are a chip off the old block. You know that? I don't say anything, and he reaches out and touches my face real gentle, as if he'd never hurt a fly. I say, boy, you know that? Answer me now. Yes, sir, I say. Everybody says so. Christmas Eve, he says. You know how many Christmas Eves I've been deprived of my own blood kin? Now, is that fair? To do that to a man? Lock him up for a crime he never did? He's waiting for me to answer, and I say, no, sir, not fair. That's over and done now, he says. We're starting fresh. Just you and me, boy. That's how it was meant to be. I'm standing under the streetlight, and it's amazing how quiet it is. Like everybody went away or died. The quiet is almost as big as he is. He's as tall as me, only wider everywhere. And for some reason, maybe because we're not far from Freak's house, I'm thinking this weird thought. He doesn't need a suit of armor. No, and he doesn't need a horse or a lance or a pledge to a king or the love of a fair lady. He doesn't need anything except what he is. He's everything all rolled into one, and no one can ever beat him, not even the brave Lancelot. He's squinting around. His eyebrows are furrowed shadows, and he says, you know what I think when I see a neighborhood like this? Hamsters is what I think. That's how these people live, like hamsters in cages. They have their little wheels to run on, and that's what they do for the whole of their lives. They run and get nowhere. They just spin. I stand there. They've poisoned you against me. You know that? He says, give it time. You'll see the truth. He starts walking fast, and I walk with him, like my feet already know where to go. We're cutting through the side streets and heading down to the pond, all cold and white and frozen. Tomorrow morning, a bunch of kids will take their new sledges and skates out there, and probably lose their mittens and scarves and get yelled at by their moms and dads. But tonight, the pond is empty as the moon, as empty as my head. Once a car goes by real slow around the pond, and I've got this strange feeling there's no one at the wheel. He hooks his finger in my collar and makes me duck down until the car goes by. The car passes, and you can't see through the dark windows, and you can hear the snow crunching under the tires, squeaky and frozen. We're invisible, he says, making me stand up. Now, isn't that a kick in the pants? My feet already know where we're going. the New Testaments. There's a few lights on in the old buildings, and you can see some of the windows are cracked. It looks like a knife cut against the light. And he's saying, you know about Mary and Joseph? How they sought shelter in Bethlehem and how the baby Jesus was born in a manger? I try to nod, and the funny thing is, even though I'm not cold, my teeth are chattering. So it's like the rest of me is freezing, but my head hasn't noticed. That's what we're doing, seeking shelter, he says, except this isn't exactly a manger we're going to. No, sir, I say, it sure isn't. He touches me real soft on the back of the neck and says, I didn't ask you a question, boy. Rule number 1, don't sass your old man. I make sure my mouth stays shut. We're coming up on the Testaments, and they look almost pretty with the new snow coating the roofs and making the yards clean and white and soft. You can see where an old bike handlebar is coming up through the snow, and shapes of other things left out. And even the old car up on the blocks looks new, like it may take off in the air without any wheels. I know where we're going, even though he doesn't tell me. The door opens before we get there, and Loretta Lee is standing in the light, and she's saying, Iggy, come look what the cat dragged in. He says, say hello to my boy, Loretta. Isn't he a chip off the old block? Then we're inside, and Iggy is there bolting the door behind us and closing the shades, and Loretta, she's wearing this real slinky red dress that looks like it might fall off if she sneezed. She's saying, mission accomplished, eh, Kenny? I knew you could do it if anybody could. Iggy says, watch your mouth, Loretta. I do believe you've been drinking, my father says. Has she been drinking, Iggy? I thought I made myself clear. Hey, it's Christmas Eve, Iggy says, and he sounds real nervous. A little punch, what can it hurt? A little punch, Loretta says. Her voice is slurpy. That's all. She's wearing these fake eyelashes, and they're coming loose, so her eyes look almost as blurry as her red mouth. I know because she keeps flapping her eyes at me and smiling so I can see where the lipstick got on her teeth. Iggy says, she's okay, Kenny. You have my word. Oh, right, Loretta says. Turned over a new leaf. Preacher Kane turned over a new leaf so there's no booze for anybody on Christmas Eve, even in our own house where a man is his castle. Oh, shut it, Iggy. Oh, shut it, Iggy says. And he makes Loretta sit down on the busted couch, where she kind of leans over and waves at me, wink, wink. Bring me and my boy some food, my father says. We've been out in the cold for 8 long years, and we're hungry, aren't we, son? Yes, sir, I say. Iggy goes out in the kitchen to fry up some hamburgers, and we sit there waiting, not saying anything. Loretta is snuggled up on the couch, passed out with this dreamy look on her face. I eat that greasy hamburger, even though I can hardly stand to swallow, and Iggy is fussing around like it's such a big deal, having Kenny Kane in the house, and it's hard to believe he's the same Iggy who's the boss of the Panheads, this motorcycle gang that strikes fear into the hearts of everybody, including the cops. Then Loretta wakes up and stretches like a cat, yawning so you can practically see right down to her throat. She says, I guess I needed that. Then she giggles, hiding her mouth. I guess I need a lot of things. My father wipes his mouth with his folded paper napkin, and he ignores her and looks at Iggy and says, You ever do time, you could be a cook. Iggy gives this nervous, like that wouldn't be fun, being a cook in prison. He says, Anytime you want, I'll show you that place I told you about. My father stands up. Now's good, he says. He looks at me. Come on, boy. By all that's holy. There's a black alley between the tenement buildings. You can't see it from the road, and Iggy takes us along the alley to this other place. You can tell how the door's been busted in and the lock broke, and we go into the dark hallway. The lights come on. The first thing I notice is the perfume an old lady wears, and the smell of cats. It ain't much, but the old bat who lives here took the greyhound to visit her sister for the holiday, Iggy says. He's trying to smile. The little room is warm and close-feeling, and the furniture is real old and saggy. There's a big old TV with a doily on the top, and an empty goldfish bowl, and piles of newspapers tied up neat with string, and a Bible on this little table by the TV. Also, there's this trick picture of Jesus on the wall, where his eyes keep following you, and you could go cross-eyed looking at it. Ain't much worth taking, Iggy says. My father's looking around, making sure the curtains are closed. You think I'd steal from an old woman? He says. Iggy shakes his head. I sure don't. Never you mind, my father says. This will do in a pinch, till we get started. Well, I better get back to Loretta. You do that. My father watches the door shut behind Iggy, and he doesn't say anything. I'm just standing there in the middle of the room because I don't know what he wants me to do. Make yourself comfy, boy, he finally says. I'm going to check we have a back way out. I'm looking at the door we came in by, just looking, when all of a sudden he's there behind me, and I feel the cool air of him on the back of my neck. You wouldn't light out on me now, would you? No, sir, I wouldn't. Sit down, he says. We need to talk man to man. I sit down in this old lady chair that's so soft I almost sink to the floor, and I'm wondering, what happened to the cats? Maybe she took them with her to visit her sister, or maybe Iggy let them out and they can't get back in. He leans over me and puts his big hands on the arms of the chair, and he says, Now your grandparents say you're nothing but a dysfunctional retard, but no kin of mine is a retard, and that's a fact. So first thing, you gotta start acting smart. Use your head. We got a situation going here, boy, so the way to handle it, you just do exactly what I say no matter what. Understood? Yes, sir. His hand shoves through my hair, and I can feel how strong he is, even though he doesn't hurt me. That's good, he says. That's real good. He goes to another room, and I can hear a door banging and stuff being moved around. And when he comes back, he's got this rope in his hands. A boy who doesn't know his own father might be dumb enough to run away. He says, We can't have that, can we? No, sir. No, sir, what? No, sir, we can't have that. What he does is tie my feet and hands, and then he loops the end of the rope around his waist. I'm taking sack time while I can, he says. You're as smart as I think you are. You'll get some shut-eye, too. He turns out the light and lies down on the floor beside the chair, with just his arm for a pillow, and for a long time I can't tell whether he's asleep or pretending. Then I decide it doesn't matter. If I move, the rope will surely wake him. It seems like we're frozen inside that room, even though the air is warm and stuffy. The soft chair keeps a hold on me. I'm not strong enough to get up. My feet and hands are getting tingly where they're tied, and pretty soon I can't even keep my eyes open. I'm half asleep, dreaming a cat is in the other room, meowing for milk, and I'm still thinking about that cat when something tugs me. He's sitting there in the dark, so I can't see his face, and he says, Wake up, sleepyhead. I better tell my own son a thing or two he needs to know about his own father. First thing, like I already said, I never killed anybody. I'm big like you're big, so folks assume things they shouldn't. You understand what I'm saying? Yes, sir, I do. Good. Now, the other thing is, the geezers you've been living with all these years, I bet they never gave you the presents I sent you, did they? No, sir, they didn't. He shakes his head real sorrowful. That's a crime, not giving a boy presents from his father. I suppose you didn't get the letters I sent. No, if they didn't give over the presents, they likely tore up the letters. Another crime against humanity, that's what that is. They hated me from the first sight, on account of my appearance, because I wasn't good enough for their precious daughter, as if a man should be blamed for how fearsome or cruel he looks, when in fact he's truly a loving person inside, which I am. I can hardly see a sad movie without crying, and I'm not afraid to say so. There's just enough street light coming through the curtains so I can make out part of his face when he turns it. You can see where there's a wet spot on his cheek, and he brushes it away. I've been locked up like an animal, he says. Every single night I cried myself to sleep, and that's a fact. Killer Kane, that's just an unkind nickname they hung on me. You know how kids can be mean in school, mean as animals? It was like that, only these weren't kids. They were adults who should have known better. Except they are so ignorant and hateful they believe the worst. His voice is sort of ragged, but you can't help but listen to him. You follow the words up and down like you're riding through mountains, and you can't see to either side. All you can see is the road just ahead. A great injustice was done to me, boy, he says. What those people did, they stole my life. They took years away from me. Might as well cut out my heart with a knife. That's how it was to lie awake each night and think about the injustice done to me. They'd blame me for all the wrongs in the world, those people, by which I mean the geezers, her folks that always hated me, and of course the police who failed to see the truth of the situation. He stops to rub away another stream of tears. There's no crying in his voice. You can't hear it there, but sure enough the tears are all over his face, slick and shiny in the pale, pale light.